So hi guys, welcome back to my channel. In this video I'll be talking about a JavaScript library used basically for building user interfaces known as React. Well, basically what is React? React, as I said before, is a JavaScript library that is basically used for building user interfaces. Unlike its competitors, including AngularJS and Vue, React is a tool which we can use to build simple components and other online user interfaces by using a virtual DOM. This is the front page of React, and here we can also learn React. It helps you, for example, create a nest component, how to add any markup or styles, displaying of data, etc. and etc. can help us with the installation of React. So here, basically, we have all the basics of React. If we take a look at the competitors of React, such as Angular, Angular is one of the main competitors of React. Angular basically is a framework and it's quite a bit different to React. However, React remains one of the more popular libraries when it comes to, for example, building various websites, apps, etc. etc. If we go to this page here, we have 15 examples of React.js websites that were basically built using React. Examples of websites include Facebook. Of course, React was developed by Facebook. We have Repeat, we have PayPal, we have Netflix, and Netflix actually uses React and React Redux for state management. So basically, if we navigate to Netflix, we can see that this entire page was built by basically React. So most of this page is built by React. What is the advantage of using React? React basically makes our web pages faster. It makes our websites faster because it uses a virtual DOM rather than using a normal DOM. So here basically I'm summarizing what I said before. React is a JavaScript library for building user interfaces, and its major competitors are basically Angular and Vue. These are also JavaScript frameworks. They are not JavaScript libraries, but they're JavaScript frameworks. If we take a look at the current Google Trends, we can see that React is still at the top. So if we observe the current Google Trends over here, we can see that React, compared to Angular and Vue, is still at the top, okay? We can see React here in blue, and as the time progresses, after 2020 and onwards, React is still one of the most preferred frameworks that is used by developers worldwide. The reason for this is it's simple and it's also extremely fast. If we take a look at why React is used mostly by most developers, is because React uses a virtual DOM, and the virtual DOM basically is a replica of the actual DOM of a web page. It's basically a replica of the website, basically the document object model, and it contains a key value pair. This eventually displays our content. The advantage of having a virtual DOM is that it bypasses going from the code to the actual DOM, and therefore the output is faster. So here we're on our command prompt, and the next thing we're going to do is basically run our first React app. So basically what we're going to do here, the first thing we're going to do is create our React app. For doing this, we're basically going to run a package called npm. npm is going to create Vite, and Vite will allow us to install not only React but also JavaScript, Vue, and other frameworks or libraries. Vite at 4.1.0. This should go ahead and install Vite. Of course, we're going to name our project different, not Vite project. We can rename it. So we're going to name it Create React App 1. And here, as we can see, we can choose our language. So vanilla is basically vanilla JavaScript. We have Vue, we have React, we have Lit, we have Svelte, we have Lit, okay, and others. We're going to select React. And as a language, we're basically going to select TypeScript. It's green, the pathway was created, and this should be taken. So our framework is React, and our variant is going to be TypeScript, our coding language. So next we're going to type in cd react app. So next we're going to type in cd react app, And in CD React app, we're going to install the npm. So npm install or npm I. I and install is basically the same thing. So we can write install, and this should install our packages. And next up, we're going to basically run our code in our code editor. So by typing code and dot, okay? This should run our code in our code editor. And effectively, our code editor over here is loading. So what we can see over here is that React has basically installed all the modules, the public, the source code. We have in the source code, we have app CSS, the index CSS, we have the index HTML page, which is basically HTML. We have the package JSON and the package.json, okay? Where, for example, installed, we have React app, we have the module, the scripts, which include Vite, Vite preview. We have dependencies, including React and React DOM, as we said before, which is basically the document object model. And these over here are the versions. So 18.2.0 is technically our current version that we're working on. And it's very important when working with React, avoid shifting files into different folders. So it's quite important to keep all your files according to their particular designated folder. If we go to our meta terminal over here, so we create new terminal, we can see our React app in the local host. So by running our terminal over here, we can now have access to our local host server by basically pasting in npm run developer or dev for short. And this should give us basically our local host. So if we click on the address in our browser, we should reach our server. And yes, actually we can see that we have the system running, okay, on a local host system, okay. And this, guys, over here is basically our first React application. One thing I would like to emphasize, guys, is that in this tutorial I will be using Vite. What is Vite and why do we use it? Before, we used to use Create React App. This has long been the go-to tool for many developers. However, Create React App has been subsidized by Vite, which basically was chosen because it has better speed and overall performance. Vite is a next generation front-end tool. It focuses on speed and performance by improving development for modern web projects, basically. Vite can serve our code locally during development and can bundle your JavaScript, CSS, or other assets together. Vite, it's important to note, is not a Vue-only tool. However, it is also used for React and also other languages, including Vue, Vanilla.js, Lit Elements, as well as HTML, CSS, and JavaScript projects. Vite, basically, an advantage of it is the configuration. Vite requires a minimal configuration, especially for basic projects. It encourages using native browser features like ES modules and CSS variables without complex setups. Vite is known for exceptional development speeds due to the use of ES modules, basically. And Vite's development server uses ES modules and an HMR, a hot module replacement, to provide high efficiency and speed of development experience. The next phase of this tutorial, we're going to basically try and create a component containing a list group, okay? And in order to do that, the first thing I did over here was install Bootstrap. This is the new version of Bootstrap, it's 5.3.1, and basically from npm I installed Bootstrap 5.3.1, and the packages were eventually added to my system. How can we install Bootstrap? So basically, it's very simple. One can go to the terminal from accessing new terminal, and from here we import the code. Coming over to the Bootstrap webpage, we can see that there's a new version of Bootstrap called version 5.3, and over here we simply just copy this code, okay? So npm install Bootstrap. So we just copy the code. Back to our code editor, we can now just paste in the code. And if we paste it in, it should eventually show us that we have Bootstrap already installed. After running, we can see that our packages are actually up to date. So audited 80 packages and 9 packages are looking for funding, whatever. So there are zero vulnerabilities. So everything is in order. Okay, Bootstrap is basically installed. And going now to our CSS, so in our source code, we should have a section here with CSS, which is this. Okay, so this is the app CSS. In app CSS, we have the basic original CSS of our running app, where we have the root with the maximum width, the margin, the padding, the text align, center, logo, the logo hover, the keyframes. So we don't need all this code because now we have Bootstrap running, and Bootstrap is going to give us a modern feel for our online application. So that goes deleted. We don't need it. And we can go now to the index CSS, and the same is here. The root, the body, the H1, this is all basically unneeded code, basically. So we don't need this code. We don't need the CSS here. We can just delete it. Okay, so that's deleted. And we can go to our index HTML. Actually, sorry, to our main TSX, where we have the TypeScript. So when it comes to importing, we're currently at the moment importing any visual information from index.css. This has to be modified, and we're going to insert our bootstrap code. So we're going to write basically bootstrap this css bootstrap.css. That should run, and we save that. We go back to the app CSS because I forgot to save it, and we just basically save. And we go to index CSS, and we also save this. So our pages shouldn't have any problems over here. So now if we go to our node modules over here, we can see that actually Bootstrap is present. So here we can see that we have Bootstrap. And of course, Bootstrap is going to give us a newer form or vision of CSS, which is going to be displayed on our browser. And if we go to our web local host over here, we can see that actually the hello mark, hello name code that we have written before is actually displaying. So our bootstrap is now working. And this is the updated code. So basically, technically, there was an error over here. Instead of bootstrap dis, it has to be bootstrap dist. So there must be a t. CSS bootstrap.css. And when we saved it, everything is working. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to our source code over here, and we're going to create a new file, a new folder called components. And inside of this file components, we're going to create a list group group.tsx, which means TypeScript, and following the Pascal type of typing, we capitalize the first letter of each word. So list and group, the first letter of each word has to be a capital. And we save that. And over here in the list group, we're going to create our TSX or TypeScript code to create a list of components. So we're going to create a function called list group. So function is going to be called list group, and the function is going to return an h1 element with a list group component, and we're going to export it. Export default list group. Okay, so here we have a semicolon, and this is going to be exported in our main TSX. So this we can save it. If we go to our app.tsx, we don't need our message component anymore. We're going to actually use our list group. So import list group from components list group. It's done automatically, really good. And we're going to return basically the message. And instead of message, we want to return our list group. So list group. Okay, and that should return. This should be the closing tag. So opening and closing tag have to be present, and the semicolon, and we're going to save that again. And over here in the list group, the code should be fine. So going back to our source code, we now have list group displaying on our local host, basically web server. The list group we created over here actually doesn't contain any list. It's really boring and it's just technically a title, okay? So what we want is to actually now create a list group. We can actually do this by copying some code. If we basically go down over here, we can find list groups. And what it does, the list group is basically give us a flexible and powerful component for displaying a series of content. As we can see, we can get basically items listed one after the other, the first item, the second item, the third item, and so on and so forth. And over here is basically the HTML that we want. So we're just basically going to clip that, copy to our clipboard, go back to our code editor, and we're going to paste it in the return. Now, we're not going to just go ahead and paste it because otherwise it's going to look pretty untidy. We're going to paste it now into a bracket, and the code basically goes here. Instead of having class, we want to write this in the format of class name. So that's a class name. This is class name, and basically we can just copy it. Class name, class name, class name. Now we're gonna go ahead and save this file. So we just save it, and it should display these items. So instead of having an item, we can write first item, second item, third item, fourth. Fifth item. We can now save that again, and it should display these items. As we can see over here, by Bootstrap, we now have a clean and ordered list of items. Instead of having just a boring list group title, as we had before in our basic web page, we want to now create a movie web page, a page displaying a set of movies, a list of movies that we can watch in either HD, 4K, or for example HDR. In order to do this, we're going to basically code a similar list, okay, or a list group, in order for us to display a list of movies on our website. So we're going to start off basically by creating a function, and this function we are going to call movie list. So movie list is a function, and it's going to contain a list of movies. It will contain a const of movies, and in this array we're going to access and include all our movie titles. Each movie will be enclosed in curly brackets, and we're going to include the title of the movie, which is going to contain the name of the movie, of course, and the quality of our movie, whether our movie is either HDR, 4K, 8K, etc., etc. So in this case, let's say it's HDR, our movie, this movie here, and so on and so forth. So we're going to copy this code here. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So here we have a list of 8 movies. We're going to close this off with a semicolon, and we're going to now return our list of movies. So return brackets open our div. So we need a div to separate the code. So there we create a div, and inside our div we're going to create a list. So our h1, our title, is going to basically name the list of movies to watch, and we're going to create a div with class name equals to movie grid. So this is going to be our grid for our displaying of movies. The movies will be basically displayed in a grid format. That's another div, we don't need that. Here we're going to have our movie dot map, and inside of our movie dot map we're going to create our movie and our index. Movie and index, which is going to display our code. So div equals key equals index, and the class name here, we're going to call it our movie card. And this is another grid. Underneath we're going to insert an image tag for images, which is going to contain a source code. You're going to include the source code of the particular movie you want to see. Okay, so the source code image is basically dependent on the movie. So movie poster, and the movie poster is going to contain the index .jpg. So basically what this is our image or the poster of our movie, what we want to see when accessing the page. This is of course our movie title, the ALT, movie.title, and we're going to close off our div. So that's our div done. Next up we're going to create another div and closing it, and inside of our div we're going to include an h2. So this is our second title, h2, and inside of it we're going to create a movie list. Movie.title. So this is our h2, and inside of it we're going to create the titles of the movies that we want to watch. So movie title, and underneath the movie title we want to have a button, so for us to click on the movie so that we watch it. So the button on click, so the movie title on click is going to give us a function. This is the function to play the movie. Play movie, and the movie is going to be movie.title and movie quality, movie.quality. So that should work. Like that we close off the button, and that is our button basically. Underneath our button we're going to basically we want to play our movie in a particular type of quality, so movie.quality. So the end of the button comes here. Here we close off our button, so this is our button. So underneath our movie title we have the button to click. As we're going to click the button, we're going to play a movie, which will be of course the movie title, the movie we want to watch, and in the quality we want to watch it, either HDR, we can have, sorry, here, over here, for example, I can have 4K. It's not only HDR, we can have 4K, we can have 720, we can have HDR, we can have 4K, and this one, for example, can be in 8K. Let's say this last movie is 8K. So here we have the movie quality, play the movie.quality, and that is our button. After finishing off the button, we're going to continue basically closing off our code. So we're going to add the div to close off this code over here. That's one of our main divs. And we're going to also add another div. So that should close off the code over here. So this should close off this, yes. So this should close this off, and this should close this off. Then we have our closing tags. Then we have our closing brackets, okay, where we have 3. And we're going to have our other divs. So this should close off the one at the top, and we should have another div. Under that, we should have our other closing bracket. We have to add a semicolon, and we're going to have our closing bracket over here. Next, we're going to create a function to play the movie. Play movie. So this function is going to play our movie, and of course, we want to play the title and quality of the movie. Inside of this function, we're going to create an alert. Alert, we are playing the movie. Playing the movie, so we're going to display the title of what we are playing in a certain quality. So $, open bracket, quality, close bracket. Okay? And that's our other closing. That's our other closing bracket. And in order for us to display everything, we're going to write a code or write to export everything. Export default movie list. Semicolon, all right? And this should actually save. So if we save it, it should actually work. So this is our updated code. And this should basically display our movie lists. Okay, so as we can see over here, we have our movie list or list of movies, and under each movie we have our image. So it can be an image of anything you want, of any particular movie you're interested in. And you have the quality of the movie you can play it in. For example, this is play in HD, in 4K, 4K, HD, HD, HD. So if we press it, we're going to get a movie alert playing the movie in HD. So playing the movie in 4K. Okay? So this basically is a modification of our list group items. Okay? We created a more aesthetically pleasing web page, okay, where we have a list of movies. And of course, if we change the image over here, we can make our movies more interesting. So if we copy this image address, it should display, yes. So for example, changing this image address over here to display one of the most recent movies. If we go back to our web page, all right, we can see that the list of movies now has changed, okay? And if we click on it, we get our full image. So our movie 1 is displaying here, our movie 2, our movie 3, etc., etc. Of course, the sizing still needs to be modified, okay? Because we're currently using Bootstrap, And we can use custom CSS to override this particular sizing and the displaying of the imagery. Now, one of the major problems here, if we go back to our movie list, we can see that we have a list of movies under each other. However, the title is not displaying. Why is this so? Why is this so? This is because that if we look here, okay, if I try to add a title over here, like H1, and I add list of movies, you can see that my code is red. If I try to display it, it's not going to display. You can see this. It's not displaying anything. Okay, so the H1 is not being read. Why is this so? This is because when we are trying to render tags in React, React can only return one tag at a time. So if we have our unordered list over here, this is considered to be one tag. And the H1 in this case is interfering with the other tag. So what can we do? We're basically going to import fragments. We're going to import fragment from React. And we're going to enclose this into a div. We can either enclose this into a fragment like this. So we can either enclose everything into a fragment, or else we can enclose it into a div. So if we enclose it into a div, and we also add a div over here, this should actually work. So we can save it. So these need to be double quotes. And this needs to be capitalized. So if we go ahead and save it, Control S on Windows, and we go back to our display. So here we can see that the title is now displaying. Okay, so the title is back to its original place. And we have a list of movies, basically in an unordered list. This is thanks to the use of fragments. So basically what we did over here, we're importing fragment from React, and we're basically allowing the display of two tags, basically the H1 for our title and our unordered list over here. So in order for us to display a list of items, we can either display a list of items like this, or else we can display a list of items from an array of items. As we have seen before, if we have titles of various movies, these movies eventually can be displayed by using React. So we're going to put return down here, okay? And inside of the movie list, we're going to create a const. So the const is going to be equal to movies, and inside of the movies, we're going to have an array of items, including, for example, Batman, we can have Spider-Man, we can have another movie, aliens, okay, etc., etc. Now, these can be all displayed if we want in the return function, okay? So how are we going to do this? One thing about React is that React cannot just display plain form script inside of its element, okay? So in order for us to display any form of script, we need to display it in curly brackets. So we have a curly bracket, which makes our coding legal for React. And then we're going to include our code, which is going to map our item we want. And inside of the map, we're going to convert any item into a list format. So we're going to convert it to an li, which is a list. And inside of the list, we're going to call the movie list, the movies. So next up, we're going to have our div, the closing tag. And we're also going to have our closing unordered list tag over here. This should export the movie list over here, and this we don't need it anymore because we don't have a fragment, and we can save that, and this should display our information. This should be small, so this should be movies.map, item converted to list, and inside of it we have item. And as we can see over here, the list of movies is displayed. So we have a list of movies, and over here we have our unordered list. So we have the movies including Batman, Spider-Man, Aliens, etc., etc. And basically that is the code of how we can present data from an array by using React. So next up, guys, I would like to talk about props. So in React we have a type of function called props. Okay, what are props? Props are basically short for properties and allow you to pass data from a parent component towards a child component. One of the things we should know about props is that props are immutable. It means they cannot be changed once they are created by the child component, and they are read-only. For example, if we have a child component that extends the React component, the parent, we're going to render the child component, okay? So we have a property name, for example, and this prop, okay, this property is going to render this property name. For example, if our child component is a patient, which has particular patient data, the class, the prop component, the prop here, is going to help us render the name or the element we want to render regarding to patient data. So in order to demonstrate our React properties or props, I'm going to create a simple code in order to show you the functionality of props and how we can use it to present our data. So we have created a file over here, a new file in the component section called patient tsx, okay? And in the patient tsx, we're going to create patient properties. So we can import React from React. And we're going to basically define the property types, the prop types. Okay? In here, we're going to have the interface, which is going to contain our patient properties. And inside of the patient properties, we're going to have a name of the patient. Basically is going to be a string. The name here is going to be a string, and we're going to have a diagnosis. And this is also going to be a string data. Next up, we're going to create our functional component. The function is going to be the patient. And the patient is going to have, of course, a name and also a diagnosis connected to him. These are going to be basically the patient properties. Inside of the function, we want to return. Okay, we're going to create a return function over here, and inside of the return function, as we've seen before in React, we cannot have more than one element or one tag. So in order to insert more than one tag, we're going to create a div. Okay, we're going to set up a div, and the div will have a class name, and the div will have a class name equal to patient. So that is our div. Inside of the div, we're going to have an h2, a header, with the name of the patient. Of course, this will display the name. Therefore, curly braces name will display our name. And we're going to have a paragraph, a P tag element. Okay, so we're going to have the diagnosis over here. And diagnosis is going to display our diagnosis. Okay. Here we have to insert a semicolon. Okay. Here the main function is closed and we're going to export everything. Export default. Alright, as patient. Semicolon, and we shall save that. Okay, everything seems to be fine over here, the code. And next up, we're going to create a patient list. So, in the component section, we're going to create a new file called patient list. In the patient list file, we're going to create a list of patients and their particular diagnosis. Okay? So we're going to have a patient, for example, John Doe, and his diagnosis. For example, this patient presented with fever of an unknown cause or unknown origin. So we're going to import, again, React from React. Very simple. We're going to import the patient, properties, import patient properties from component patient. This is going to basically imports our patient component. Over here, we're going to define the property types of the patient again. So we're going to define the patient property types. And to define it, we'll have an interface. We're going to have an interface with patient data. And inside of the patient data, we're going to contain the name, okay, which is going to have, for example, string format. And we're going to have diagnosis. And this is going to be a string format as well. Okay, our semicolon here. All right, here is closed again. So this needs to be a small letter because that would be wrong. All right, we don't need to camel case it. So this is small and also this is small. And patient data is camel cased. Okay, so we're going to go down and create our function, which will contain most of our data. So the function is going to be called patient list this time, and it's going to be a list. Inside of the patient list, we're going to return a const variable, and it's going to contain patients, which is going to be equivalent to patient data. And of course, this patient data is going to be, guess what, an array. All right? So the array is going to be equivalent to what? Okay? It's going to be equivalent to a set of data. So we're going to start off with our array. All right? We're going to have a name of the patient. For example, it's going to be John Doe. And we're going to have a diagnosis. And the diagnosis is going to be, for example, fever. Next, we're going to have a name, another patient, Alice, with diagnosis fractured limb. We can also, to speed up the process, just copy and paste. Okay, otherwise we're going to have a list, never-ending list till tomorrow. Yeah, we can call this guy, for example, Bob Johnson. is going to have, for example, influenza, flu. We can have another person called Alice Doe, the wife of John Doe, and she's going to have diabetes. We can have someone called Mary, who has hypertension. And we're going to have a Mark, okay, who has gastric ulcers or gastritis. Let's say he has GORD, okay. Of course, we're going to close everything in our array and apply a semicolon. This function shouldn't be capital, it should be small, all right, otherwise it's going to be incorrect. And const patients here should also be small, okay, otherwise our code will be incorrect. We can close this off. And next we want to return some code. So we're going to return a function, we're going to close it off with a semicolon, and we're going to insert a div again. Because in React, when we are trying to display something in React, we need just one div element, and everything inside of the div can be displayed. So we're going to create a class name, and the class name is going to be called patient list. Inside of the div, we want to have an h1 containing a list of patients, and we're going to have the patient map. So we're going to map the data, patient.map, okay, which will map patient data, and the map will contain the patient and the index. This is going to give us an arrow function. So this is going to now go towards an arrow function over here, and inside of the arrow function, we're going to insert a tag for patient. The patient tag is going to contain some definitions. It's going to contain the key, which is equal to our index. It's going to contain name equal to patient name, and it's going to contain diagnosis equal to patient dot diagnosis. Okay, here the tag closes, okay, so we can put this closing part over here. Here we have our function close, okay, so this needs to be corrected because we need to have an extra closing bracket. So this should close it. We have a div over here, we have the return. So the return statement can only be used inside of the function, that is true. So I made a mistake here, this needs to be eliminated because the return can only be within the function patient list. And this patient should be actually capitalized, okay, because otherwise the code is incorrect. So now it's all fine. We have the index, we have the patient over here, we have the index, actually row, we have to close it off, the function, and we need to export default patient list. Now we should save it. Next up, we can go to app.tsx, okay, and this is basically going to display our data. So if we basically go to the app.tsx over here, all right, we can import React, we can import the patient list from patient list. The function app, which is going to display our data, is going to return the class name app and is going to return our patient list. So over here, our code has now displayed a list of patients, all right? For example, here we have the name of the patient, we have the diagnosis, name of patient, diagnosis, name of patient, and diagnosis. So basically over here, I gave a short, brief overview of how to use props in the formation of particular data. and how props can be used in order to display data on a front page of a website. Of course, the styling over here is very basic, and if one wants to style it in a better way, one can use different CSS styles which can be applied to the code. If we add some CSS styles, okay, for example here, we're adding some CSS styles to the main index page, okay? So for example, we have a patient list which will have a maximum width of 600 pixels, a margin which is auto, a padding, a background color. This can be changed, of course, okay? A back shadow, all right, a border radius. For example, our background color can be changed. And if we change our background color, let's say to gray, we can see a change in the background. A patient card, which also has a background color, let's change it to gray. And we save that. And if we go to our main page, okay, we can see now we have a patient list and the background color over here changed. We can also go back to our patient data and we can change this again. So for example, I want a different color. All right, so let's change it to light gray and let's give it a bluish tint. Let's make it light blue, okay? We save that again. And over here, now we have a light blue tint. So basically by modifying the CSS, we can modify the output of the output on our page. So that's some basic information about using props in React. The next thing we're going to discuss is basically React State. State is basically a fundamental concept in React that basically allows us to manage our components and allows basically the components to manage their own data. It basically helps users interact dynamically, creating interactive user interfaces, and it basically helps the components react to user interaction. State helps to avoid prop drilling, which is a process of passing down props through multiple layers of components. React encourages declarative approaches to building user interfaces. Therefore, using state, you can update the component's data in real time within the DOM. An example of state is given below over here. For example, in this function, we have increment count, and this set state, all right, will basically give the count, okay, +1, all right, this state plus count by 1. It increases the count of our particular number by 1 because the function here is basically increment count. So state helps us to manage the components within the components itself, okay? Unlike props, which is immutable, it's read-only, state is dynamic, okay? It helps to create variation in our components. Now we're going to give a particular example of how to use state in React. So just as we have seen before with creating a React prop, now we're going to create a React state, and basically the difference between the prop and the state. So here we're going to create a patient file, as we have seen before. We're using transcript, TSX, and so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to move to our components and we're going to move to our patient file. We're going to define the file as patient file, okay? Inside of it, we're going to import React from React, and we're going to create an interface. So the interface is going to have the patient data again, and patient data is going to contain name, which is going to be a string, and condition, which is also going to be a string. Next up, we're going to create an interface for props, which is basically defining the properties. Okay, and the patient is going to be defined by the patient data. We're going to create a const for patient, which is going to be constant. And the const is going to contain React FC, which is going to contain the property, the props. The props are going to be equal to a function, and the function is going to contain the patient. The arrow function is going to contain and return basically a div, and the div is going to have a class name equal to patient card. Inside of this div, we're going to have an h3 tag containing patient name and a paragraph tag, a p tag, containing the condition. We're going to display the condition, and in order for us to display the condition, we're going to write patient dot condition. This we're going to close with a semicolon, and this we're going to close with a semicolon. Export as default as patient. Okay. So this should be small because it's a props. That should be saved over here. Next, we're going to go to patient list. In the patient list, we're going to create a list of patients. So this is going to be our patient list file. And inside of it, we're going to import React from React. We're going to also import the patient from patient components. From the components, we're going to import our patient data. We're going to create a const, naming it patient list, and the const is going to be equal to react.fc, functional component, which is going to be a function, an arrow function. And in the arrow function, we're going to have a const array of patients. So const, we can create an array with patients, and we can set the patient data, set patients to use state. Use state is going to be a function, and the function is going to contain the array. So whenever we're creating a state, guys, okay, we must write this function called the use state, okay? Because this is going to be basically part or essential for our creation of the state, of what we want to create. Inside, we're going to have a name. Okay, again, the same. We're going to have, like, for example, John Doe, and the condition, which is going to be, for example, fever. We're going to have another one, like name, Jane Smith, condition, fracture femur. And the third patient, to make it short this time, we're going to have Bob. So Bob Johnson is going to have a condition of flu. Okay. We can close everything with a semicolon, and we're going to return everything inside of the function. So we're going to create a return statement over here, and the return is going to give us a div with a class name of patient list. We're going to have an h2 list of patients. List of patients, our h2 is going to contain list of patients. We're going to have patient.map, which is going to be a function. Inside of the function we have the patient and index. There's going to be an arrow function, and inside of it we're going to have the patient key, index, and the patient, which is going to be the patient data. So we have the patient, which will have the key, and the key will be the index, whilst the patient will also contain patient. We can close this off. We can close the tag off. We have our div, okay. Here we have a semicolon. We can close off the function as well. And we export everything. Export default as patient list. Okay, we can save that. So we can save our code over here, and going now to the app.tsx, basically the output. From our output in app.tsx, we can see we're importing React from React. We're importing the app.css, the CSS component, and we're importing the patient list from patient list. The function over here, our app function, is going to return our patient list data, and is going to export everything on our website, on our website, on our local host. If we go to our local host, we can see now that we have a list of patients. We have patient 1, patient 2, and patient 3, and each one we have a display of their condition, name, and condition, for example, fever, fracture, and flu. And this basically is an example of how to use state in React. So now, basically, to conclude the video, I'm going to do a small project, a micro project, which is basically going to consider a diabetes management system or a diabetes log system, which is basically going to help us record our glucose levels after, for example, having a meal. In the system, we're going to create a log system, which is going to basically save a number on our screen. And this, for example, system may be emulated, for example, in the clinical setting on a very simple, for example, interface or clinical software. So the first thing we're going to do in order for us to start our prototype basically is to go to our source code. In the source code, we're going to basically create a content section over here as a new folder, and inside of the content section we're going to create a file called diabetes context. This file is going to basically contain the context properties of the diabetes, okay? And is going to have the diabetes context props, the diabetes provider, the use state, okay, and for example the add log system. So for example, we're going to start coding our interface over here. So interface is going to consist of diabetes context properties as props, and inside we're going to have the logs. which is going to consist of basically a number, semicolon, and we're going to add log. Inside of the add log function, we're going to insert a log, and the log is going to be a number. Arrow function void. Now we're going to create a const for diabetes context, which is equal to create context, and the create context is going to contain a diabetes context property. Diabetes context properties, and is going to be undefined. Next up, we're going to export function, and we're going to export diabetes the diabetes provider function, which is going to contain our children. This function is going to now contain a constant, and is going to log and also set logs. So this needs to be capital, set logs. We're going to use state function as we've seen before, and in the use state we're going to basically call a number which will be an array, and within the function we're going to have an array as well, and we're going to close that off with a semicolon. So that is the export part. This we need to close off with a semicolon, and over here we're going to write const. So const add log equals to function log semicolon number, inside of which we're going to continue with a function, an arrow function, and we're going to basically set logs as logs. So the set logs, which is going to be a set of logs, of course, is a function, and inside we'll have an array with 1, 2, 3 logs and log, and over here I'm going to close it off as well. This is going to return a function, and is going to give us diabetes context dot provider, which will be a value, and the value will be a function. So the value will contain a function inside of which we'll have the logs and the add log, which is basically going to add new data to our system. That we're going to close it off, and over here we're going to have children, so and the new logs being displayed. That we close off, and that we can also close it off. We're going to have export. Next up we're going to have an export const use diabetes equals function. We're going to have an arrow function, and is going to basically close off here. In the const, we're going context. In the const, we have a context. We're going to set use context, diabetes context. So our context is going to be diabetes context. We're going to close it off. If the context is equivalent to undefined, Then we will throw a new error, throw new error. So this needs to be a capital. We're going to throw a new error, and the error message is going to basically tell us use diabetes must be used within the diabetes properties. Okay, so use. So we're going to display an error, and in the error we're going to state this. Okay, so use diabetes must be used within a diabetes provider. Okay, this is going to be our error message. Throw new error, not new console, and we're going to close it off, and we're going to return context. We can save that. So this is basically the code, and one thing I forgot to add over here is basically to import our use state and our create context, use state from React. So from React we're going to import React basically, the create context, the use context, and the use state. These have to be imported. Okay, we can save that. Here there seems to be an error, which we can see over here. There's a problem. As we can see here, this children property over here is giving us an error. This can be solved by basically modifying the code a bit. This basically can be written directly in the diabetes provider component. If we modify the code, we basically have a similar type of code over here. We have create context, use state, React node. We have an interface. Const diabetes context is going to give us create context, diabetes context properties. Now, interface diabetes provider properties are going to contain the children. So the children over here are going to be written directly in an interface of properties of the diabetes provider, which is basically going to be our React node. This is going to give us a constant of logs and set logs, and is going to return our diabetes context.provider with the values, logs, and add log. We're going to export everything at the end by using the const use diabetes, and if the context is undefined, we're going to throw a new error. Use diabetes must be within a diabetes provider. This is basically, this is wrong, it should be eliminated, and this should run if we save it, yes. Now our code seems to be okay, seems to be working. Next up, we're going to move towards our component section. In our React app over here, we're going to move to the components, and inside of the components we have 3 files which were added via new file. Okay, so in the components we added new files, and we have the dashboard, we have a log form and a log list. The log form is going to give us the form layout on our web page, and the log list is basically going to list our logs. So we're going to start off with the first thing, basically the dashboard. So let's go ahead and basically code the dashboard system. So inside of our dashboard, we're going to basically import various files. We're going to import React from React, that's obvious. We're going to import the other 2 files. So we're going to import the log form, which is not completed yet, and we're going to import the log list. So this is the log list. All right, we're going to create a const, which is going to basically be named dashboard, and is going to be equal to react.fc, which is equal to a function, and the arrow function is going to basically contain a return. The return is going to give us, of course, a div. As we said before, React cannot have multiple tags, okay, within one element. Okay, so we need to have a div element over here, and inside of the div we can have eventually multiple tags. So we can have an h1, which is basically going to contain the diabetes management dashboard. Okay, inside of the h1 we will have our form, which is going to log our diabetic readings, the log form, and we want to display the log list, of course, of the list of items that we are going to log. Okay, so the log list will basically be a list of blood results. Okay, we're going to close that off, and we're going to close that off, and here we're going to export default. Export default as dashboard. This is going to be exported, and we can save that. So that's our dashboard ready. The code seems to be fine, there are no errors, and there you go, that's our dashboard. Now let us go ahead and technically create our form. So the form right now is empty, okay, therefore it's giving us an error because of course we have nothing in our form. And inside of the form, we're going to create basically a small form. So we're going to import React, and it's going to basically import use state from React. We're going to import use diabetes, okay, from diabetes context. Okay, so again, the diabetes context is technically basically the form is over here. So this will be imported into our form, diabetes context. The context of diabetes basically is going to tell us the diabetes context properties, the logs, the add log function, okay, the use diabetes. So this is basically giving us the interfaces and the children. This is going to be displayed in the log form, and we're going to continue creating the form. We're going to create a const called log form. Again, is going to be equal to react dot fc, which is equal to a function, and inside of which we're going to return a const, and we're going to return a const. The const is going to contain a log and a set log, and by using use state, okay, we're going to contain a number. We're going to have a number, and the number is going to start at 0. The other const or constant is going to add the log. So we're going to add our log. We're going to add the log we have, which is going to be equal to use diabetes function. And we're going to close that off. This is going to be closed off. And next we're going to go const handle submit. We have a const, we have a handle submit equals react dot form event. We're going to have an arrow function, and the arrow function is going to basically give us prevent. We're going to prevent the default, okay, and in the prevention of default, basically we want to prevent default of add log containing our log and our add and set, and our of course set log. In our set log, we're going to have 0. So 0 is going to be already set. When we run the application on our system, this is going to be already set up. So set log and add log. So next up, we're going to have a return function. Inside of the return, we're going to contain a form, and we're going to have on submit. we'll have a handle. So handle submit. So upon submitting our data in our form, we basically want to create a sort of function, all right, some similar to that you find in JavaScript, which is going to basically create a handle submit. And we're going to have an input. Inside of our input, we want the input to have a type, which is going to be a number, but actually we want the type to be as a number over here. It's not something we want to insert. We want to have a value. So our input, we want to have a number, we're going to have a value. The value also is going to be, in this case, a value, which is obviously going to be our log. And on change, we want E. We're going to have a function, arrow function. We want E to set our log. Set log. And in our set log function, we basically want a number. E.target and value. That's fine, it should close. And we should also make sure that this is required. So we make sure that all the data has to be inputted where it is inputted. Okay, that is required. And underneath our input, we're going to create a button. So the button is going to contain a type. The type of button is going to be a submit button. That's a submit button. Closing it off. And over here, we're going to write submit log in our button. The form, we can close it. This, we can we can place a semicolon. All right, we can close our function. And we can export default log form. We can close that off. There might be some errors over here. React, we're going to use state from React, import user abilities from context, yes. So the errors have gone. So React form event, okay. Yes, so our code is correct. We can save that. And that basically has created our log form. So after creating the log form now, next we're going to create a log list. In the log list, we're going to write some code which basically is going to help us list our log directly on the screen. In order to do this, we're going to import React from React, and next we're going to import the use. We're going to import the user abilities from context, the abilities context. This is automatically imported. Next up, we're going to create a constant of the log list. And this constant is going to be basically equal to React FC, which is going to have a function, arrow function, and is going to contain a const of logs equals use diabetes, which is going to be a function. We close that off. We're going to return a div. And inside of this div, again, we're going to create a header, an h2, which you're going to have logged data presented. And you're going to have an unordered list, inside of which we are going to basically display our logs. So logs.map, which is going to be displayed. And inside of this, we're going to have the log and the index. So inside of it, we're going to have a log and the index. This is going to be basically a function, an arrow function, and we're going to insert a list item, which is basically key of which is going to be the index. We can close that off. And of course, this index is going to be the log. Okay? So we're going to return the displayed item, which is basically going to be a list item, and the list item is going to be basically the index and the log. We're going to close this off. Okay, so here it's closed off. Our second one should be closed off. So map, this should be double actually. Now this should be also closed off. Unordered list, okay, div, we have okay and okay. And we're going to export everything. Export default as log list. Okay, so as we can see here, there are no errors in our code. Okay, the code is taken, and this is basically the code for us to display a list of logs on our screen. The function here, const log list, basically is going to be equal to use diabetes function, is going to return the log data. Okay, the log data is going to basically give us the list items which are going to display the log on our screen. And this can be, for example, of course, the level of diabetes sugar levels in our blood, which are going to be displayed on the screen. We're going to save that, save as. And next up, after creating the dashboard, the log form and the log list, we're going to basically move to the app TSX. So now, in order for us to display everything on our screen, we have to write some code. So first of all, we're going to start the interface, the local host, and in order to do that, we're going to basically do npm run dev. That's going to start our Vite and our local host in order for us to see some data on our screen, on our website. Might take some time. Okay. And we should be connected. Okay, so that's the connection, that's the local host, and we can follow the link. If we follow the link, everything is blank at the moment because our main screen is not being displayed because we don't have any code in the app.tsx. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to import some of the components. So we have import React. We're going to import React. We're going to import. So we're going to import React. We're going to import next our diabetes provider. So we're going to write diabetes provider from context, diabetes context. And we're going to import the dashboard. Okay? Dashboard is going to import it from components dashboard. And we're going to create a function const app react.fc, which is going to be equal to a function, an arrow function, and it's going to return the diabetes provider. So this is going to return diabetes provider. So this is going to return diabetes provider, inside of which we're going to create a div. And inside of the div, one of the divs, we're going to have a class name of app. So this div is going to contain a class name which is equal to app. Inside of which we're going to basically display our dashboard. The dashboard is basically what the patient is going to interact with. So this can be closed off. Okay, this is also closed off. Here we're going to insert a colon, semicolon. That's another semicolon. And we're going to export everything. Export default as app. So we saved everything, we have written the code has been taken, there seems to be no errors in the code, and if we go to our main page again, we can see now that our diabetes management system or dashboard, the patient dashboard, is working. In order to check whether or not it actually works, is we're going to write some glucose levels, okay? So for example, we can say our glucose today after eating was around 6.5 or 6.6. Let's say 6.5 millimoles. And we're going to log that. And yes, in our list items now we have a glucose level in the blood of around 6.5. Next, we can say that we have a post meal glucose level of 11, and we can also log that. We have a 0, we can say we have a 3, 3.5, a bit of hypo, etc., etc. And if we keep on doing that, it's going to keep on registering our data. Okay? The dashboard or the patient dashboard system is very rudimentary. It's not a really beautiful system. Okay? However, it's basically functional. In order for us to change the system and make it more appealing, we can also, of course, modify the CSS. So if we go to our index.css and add some CSS code and save everything, if we return back to our main dashboard on our website, we can now see that the interface has now changed. This is a bit weird, it came to the left. However, we can see that the interface changed. And if we increase, for example, our numbers, okay, let's say 8, it still reads. However, the difference in this interface is that the interface became a bit prettier. It looks more decent or professional. On the left hand side, we can see that we are saving our log data or the glucose readings, and the system seems to be a bit more patient, user friendly. So basically, that was a very simple diabetes management dashboard system created by using React. And basically, the best way to learn coding is basically trying to build something. When you try to build something, in the process of building something, you basically learn how to code. So I hope this video was interesting, guys. I will try to release more videos with regards to coding. Thanks for watching the video, subscribe to my channel, and see you in the next video.